Welcome to our channel, Dark Whisper. Asterisk, if you're new here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Because what you're about to hear tonight isn't just another scary story, it's a collection of 20 shadows, whispers, and lost screams. Stories from people who once dared to sleep in the abandoned houses of Texas. Some of them never came back. Some came back wrong. And some, well, they're still wandering those broken hallways, waiting for someone like you to listen. Asterisk. Story 1, about a man who decided to sleep inside an abandoned Texas house. And what woke up with him inside, he'd been driving for 9 hours straight. Asterisk. The road between El Paso and Pecos was a black river of dust and broken headlights, stretching into nothing. The kind of road where your phone signal dies, and even the radio gives up trying to find a voice. Asterisk. Daniel Crow wasn't supposed to be there that night. He was a long-haul mechanic on his way to a job in Odessa. But when his truck broke down near a dead stretch of highway, he realized he wasn't going anywhere until morning. Asterisk. The air was dry, the stars cruelly bright. Coyotes howled somewhere out on the hills. And when his flashlight flickered over a crooked mailbox that read, McEwen Farm, EST, 1928, he thought, hell. A roof. Asterisk. The house stood half a mile down a gravel road, an old two-story with its bones showing. Every window was dark, the porch sagged like an old man's jaw, and the front door hung loose from one hinge. It looked dead. Everything in that part of Texas did. He stepped inside. The smell hit first dust, old wood, and something faintly metallic, like blood that had dried years ago. Asterisk. Hello. He called out, just to break the silence. His voice bounced back off the cracked walls. Asterisk. The living room was still full of furniture. A sofa with its stuffing clawed open, a piano with keys yellowed and broken, pictures on the wall, faded faces of a family that looked like they'd never left. 1935, the father in overalls, the mother with her hair tight in a bun, 2 kids. None of them smiled. Asterisk. Daniel pulled out his sleeping bag, laid it near the cold hearth, and told himself not to think too hard about it. It was a roof, and he was tired. He fell asleep around midnight. That was when the piano played. Asterisk. Just one note, soft, out of tune, but enough to make his eyes snap open in the dark. Asterisk. He sat up, listening. Wind, maybe, or the house settling. But then it came again, 3 notes. Slow, like fingers sliding down ivory. Asterisk. He grabbed his flashlight, but it didn't turn on. The batteries were new that morning. He hit it against his palm. Nothing. Asterisk. The dark in that house wasn't normal dark. It was thick, like syrup. It pressed against him, heavy and whispering. Asterisk. He felt his way to the doorway and froze. Someone was standing by the piano. Asterisk. Just the shape at first, tall, lean, unmoving. He thought maybe it was a coat rack, until it shifted. Asterisk. Hey, he said, voice shaking. Who's there? No answer. Then the creak of a floorboard, the sound of bare feet dragging. He backed up. His heel hit the hearth, and he tripped, hitting the ground hard. The thing moved faster now, crossing the room with a slow, scraping rhythm. Asterisk. He crawled backward toward the stairs, heart hammering so loud it drowned out everything else. He didn't dare look away. And that was when lightning flashed through the window. For half a second, he saw it. Not a man, not exactly. Skin stretched too tight, lips pulled wide, eyes gone milky white, and its mouth opened like a scream that didn't make a sound. Then the dark swallowed it again. He bolted up the stairs. The steps groaned under him, dust exploding around his boots. At the top, he ducked into the first room, a child's bedroom. A rusted crib, wallpaper of moons and stars. A rocking horse that creaked once when the wind came through the cracked window. Asterisk. He crouched behind the bed, trying to quiet his breathing. Asterisk. Below, the piano started again. Asterisk. A slow, broken melody, plink, plink, like fingers learning how to be human again. Asterisk. He thought about running out, but the sound of footsteps came up the stairs, 1 step at a time. Asterisk. He could see its shadow stretch along the hallway, long and thin. arms almost touching the floor. Asterisk when it reached the top, it stopped. The piano stopped too. The house went perfectly still. He held his breath until his chest burned. Then, from somewhere close, too close, a voice whispered, "You shouldn't sleep here." Asterisk, he turned. No one there. Just the crib, the peeling wallpaper, and the sound of something breathing under the bed. Asterisk, he didn't move. The air turned icy, and he could see his breath cloud in front of him. The thing under the bed laughed. He ran. Straight down the hallway, down the stairs, out through the broken door, not stopping until he hit the dirt road. He didn't look back. Asterisk, he slept in his truck that night, keys clutched in his hand, engine dead. At dawn, he finally got out and walked back to the main road, flagged down a farmer. The man gave him a ride and a coffee, and when Daniel mentioned the McEwen place, the farmer went pale. Asterisk boy, he said slowly. That house burned in 42. Whole family inside. They say the father went crazy one night, locked the doors, and played the piano while it happened. Asterisk Daniel didn't say a word. He just nodded, got out in Pecos, and bought a bus ticket east. Asterisk but a few nights later, in a cheap motel outside Midland, he woke up to the faint sound of piano keys again, soft, broken notes from the dark corner of his room. Asterisk, he threw on the light. Nothing there, except a thin layer of ash on the carpet, and a small, blackened handprint pressed into the wall beside his bed. Asterisk. Story 2. The first thunder hit, like a gunshot. Tom Harlan had been driving west since noon, chasing a storm that had been trailing him like a black dog. The road signs had long stopped naming towns, just distances. 60 miles, 40-20. Then, nothing but scrub mesquite and barbed wire. Asterisk, he'd been on his way to see his ex-wife in El Paso. He didn't even know why anymore, maybe to talk, maybe to beg. But when the sky cracked open and rain poured down in sheets, he couldn't see the road. Asterisk, he pulled over, headlights glowing against the rain, and noticed a thin dirt track disappearing off the highway. No sign, no mailbox. Just a faded trail into the desert. He took it, half a mile in the world, opened to a clearing, and there it was, an old farmhouse, grey wood-soaked, windows black as oil. It looked like it hadn't been touched in 50 years, but the porch roof was still up, and that was good enough. Asterisk, he parked under a tree, grabbed his duffel, and ran for it. The front door was unlocked. Asterisk inside. The air was cold and thick, smelling faintly of wet hay and rot. His flashlight beams slid across the walls. Old photos, furniture covered in sheets, a cross above the fireplace. Asterisk, he called out, "Anybody here?" Only thunder answered. He found the parlor dry enough to sit, spread his jacket on the floor, and lit a cigarette. The sound of rain on the tin roof was strangely soothing. Then he saw the footprints. Small, muddy ones. A child's, maybe 6 or 7 years old, leading from the back door straight into the kitchen. Bare feet, fresh. Asterisk, he froze. The rain had just started a few minutes ago. There was no car outside, but his asterisk, he got up slowly, flicked his light toward the kitchen, and called out again. "Hey kid, you lost or something?" Asterisk, the beam caught the edge of a table, a rusted sink, a broken window. The footprint stopped by the sink and disappeared. Asterisk, he felt a twinge of unease, but told himself there had to be a logical reason. Maybe someone had been squatting here. Maybe they'd gone out the back. He shut the door and decided to wait for the storm to pass. Hours bled by. The rain didn't stop. Around midnight, lightning flashed through the windows, white and sharp, and for a second, he saw a reflection in the glass across from him, a small figure standing just behind him. He turned fast. Nothing there. Asterisk, the cigarette trembled in his hand. He laughed it off, but the laughter died quickly when he saw something else. A toy sitting on the mantel. A small wooden horse, carved rough, but clearly handmade. He hadn't noticed it before. He picked it up and realized it was wet. Rainwater dripping slowly down his wrist. He dropped it. A creak echoed from upstairs. Asterisk, he stared at the ceiling. The sound came again, the floorboards shifting, slow, deliberate. like someone pacing in a circle above him. Asterisk, he took his flashlight and climbed the stairs, one hand on the railing. The beam shook with every heartbeat. Asterisk, the upper hallway was lined with doors. Every one of them was open, except one at the end, slightly ajar. Light flickered through the crack. Asterisk, he called out, "Hey, whoever's up here, I don't want trouble. I just need a place to stay till the rain's gone." No reply. He pushed the door open. Asterisk, it was a child's room, wallpaper peeling with faded drawings of clouds and balloons. A small bed in the corner, the blankets still tucked in neat and tight. A single oil lamp on a dresser burned with a weak yellow flame. Asterisk, the strange thing was, there was no smell of oil, no draft, no explanation for how it was lit. Asterisk, he turned to leave, and that was when the door slammed shut. The lamp flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed the room whole. Asterisk, he spun around, fumbling for his flashlight. It came on, but the beam was weak, jittering. The temperature dropped. He could see his breath. Asterisk, a whisper floated through the room. Soft, female, don't wake her. Asterisk, he froze. Who's there? Silence. Then the bedsheet moved. Asterisk, something small sat up beneath it. The shape of a head, shoulders, long hair falling forward. Asterisk, hey, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. You okay? Are you hurt? The figure turned toward him, slow creaking. The flashlight flickered once and, in that half-second of light, he saw a girl's face. Skin grey-blue, lips sewn shut with black thread, eyes open, staring right through him. The light went out completely. He ran for the door, slamming into it with his shoulder until it burst open. The hallway was darker than before, darker than night should be. It felt like walking through ink. Asterisk behind him. Tiny footsteps pattered, quick and wet. The sound of laughter muffled, broken, like a cassette tape twisting. Asterisk, he reached the stairs, stumbled down, and hit the front door. It wouldn't budge. Something whispered in his ear. You shouldn't have touched her toy. Asterisk, he turned and saw the girl at the bottom of the stairs, now, head tilted, lips still sewn, blood trickling down her chin. In her hand, she held the little wooden horse. Asterisk, she walked toward him, each step making a crunch like snapping twigs. Asterisk, he grabbed a chair and threw it through the window. The glass shattered, and cold rain sprayed his face. He climbed out, fell to the mud, and ran for the truck. Asterisk, the headlights flickered on by themselves. The engine coughed, then started. Asterisk, he didn't look back. Not once. He drove straight to the highway, rain pounding like nails on the roof. Asterisk, by morning, the storm was gone. The desert stretched empty again, golden and silent. He stopped at a diner in Marfa, still shaking. Asterisk, when the waitress asked where he'd come from, he told her about the farmhouse off the dirt road. Asterisk, she went pale. You mean the Loring place? Honey, that place burned down in 1957. Lightning hit the roof. Family never made it out. Little girl, they say, she was found upstairs, in her bed, holding her daddy's wooden horse. Asterisk, Tom's coffee went cold in his hands. He didn't say a word. Asterisk, but that night, when he checked into a cheap motel outside Van Horn, he found muddy footprints on the carpet near the window, small, barefoot prints. Asterisk, and on the nightstand, the wooden horse. Asterisk. Story 3 asterisk. It starts on the outskirts of El Paso, where the wind crawls through broken windows like a dying breath. There's an old farmhouse there, burned at the edges. Its paint blistered and peeled like old skin. Teenagers called it the tax house because it was seized long ago. Property of the state, left to rot. But locals said it was more than just unpaid bills that drove the owners away. Something lived inside. Asterisk, the first story came from a boy named Miles. He was 17 when he and his 3 friends broke into the house one summer night. They wanted to film a dare for YouTube, 24 hours in the abandoned tax house. The first few hours were all laughs and flashlights, until around 2:30 a.m., when the power banks died and the air grew so still that they could hear the rafters breathing. Miles said he woke up to the sound of someone walking, Not footsteps, but dragging, like someone's feet were bare and heavy. He turned on his phone light, and the beam caught a shape crouched in the corner. It looked like an old man, spine bent, arms too long. When the light hit its eyes, they didn't blink. They reflected. And then it smiled, slow, cracking its face open like splitting wood. Miles screamed. When police found him the next morning on the road, he had walked 12 miles barefoot. His feet were bleeding, and his phone was still recording. The other 3 were never found. But that house wasn't alone. There's another one in Midland, hidden behind a wall of dead pecan trees. It was repossessed after the owner, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Harlan, vanished. Locals say she'd gone mad after losing her pension, scribbling tax forms on the walls, begging the collectors to stop coming. Decades later, a couple of hitchhikers slept there. They said they woke to scratching, paper tearing, pen scraping. In the morning, every wall was covered again in fresh writing, names, addresses, numbers. One name was theirs. One address was the motel they planned to stay at the next night. They didn't. They left the state and never came back. Further east. In Tyler, there's a house that doesn't exist on any record. Folks just call it the collector's place. You can only find it after dark, when the humidity is thick and the frogs stop croaking. The story goes that people who owe debts, tax, money, time, are drawn there in their dreams first. Then, one day, they take a wrong turn and end up standing before it, even though they swore they'd never seen it before. Inside, it's quiet, too quiet. The air tastes like dust and old blood. There's furniture, yes, but it's covered in sheets stitched from something coarse and strange. One man said he lifted a corner of one, and it was skin-thin, stretched, almost translucent. His own handwriting was carved on it, his signature, from a tax form he'd filed years ago. He never went back. The 4th story belongs to a woman named Clarissa. She worked for the state, a tax assessor in San Angelo. Her job was to inspect foreclosed homes before resale. One summer, she entered a small property on County Road 9. Everything was intact, photos on the wall, toys on the floor, dinner still rotting on the table. It looked like the family had vanished but she noticed something. All the clocks had stopped at 3:17. Even her phone glitched and froze. She felt something breathing behind her, soft but steady, and when she turned around, she saw her own shadow moving against the wall, only she wasn't moving. The shadow raised its arm, then pointed toward the back door. She ran. The house was condemned the next week. She quit her job and moved to Colorado. She still won't go near any house with boarded windows. By the time the stories reached the 10th house, the one in Amarillo, people had started calling them the tax houses. There were maps drawn, blogs written, YouTubers making lists. But the strange thing was, the houses kept changing. Some burned down, some were demolished, and new ones appeared, always marked as government seized, always empty, always waiting. One of the darkest tales came from a man named Eric, a storm chaser who took shelter in one during a tornado watch. He said the house smelled of wet dirt and copper. While the wind howled outside, he felt the floor shift, like something crawling underneath. Then the sound of whispering, faint but close. It wasn't one voice. It was hundreds. He said they were praying, begging. When he turned on his light, he saw shapes pressed under the wallpaper, faces, mouths open in silent screams. He blacked out and woke up in his car, parked miles away. His dashcam showed nothing, except at 2:37 a.m., the radio turned on by itself, playing an old voice repeating, "Taxes unpaid. Debt eternal." People began to say these weren't just houses, they were places that remember. Every owner who'd ever lost their property, every family broken by bills or foreclosure, left a piece of themselves there: grief, rage, hopelessness. It built up over decades, feeding something that wasn't human anymore. Something that waited for those who disrespected the ruins, the trespassers, the thrill-seekers, the daredevils, who thought ghosts were just stories. And then came the 20th account, the one that made even the locals stop talking. A group of paranormal investigators called Lone Star Explorers decided to spend Halloween night inside all the tax houses they could find in a single night. They live-streamed the whole thing. The first few hours were normal: laughter, exploration, shadows, sounds. But around 3 a.m., their stream cut out. When it came back on the next morning, the feed showed only one camera still active, pointed at a cracked mirror. You could see the reflection of the living room, and behind the camera, figures began to appear. First one, then another, and another. All pale, still, with faces that looked too familiar. Viewers realized they were the missing people. Miles, Mrs. Harlan, the hitchhikers, Eric, Clarissa, one by one. They turned toward the camera, mouths opening, whispering together, "Pay what you owe." Police found the team's van abandoned on a dirt road near Waco. Inside were their IDs, gear, and a single note scribbled in black ink. Some debts don't end when you die. And if you ever find yourself driving through rural Texas, and you see an old wooden sign marked property of the state, don't stop. Don't even look too long, because once you see a tax house, it sees you back. And one night, when you're tired, when you think you've escaped it, you'll hear that same whisper through the walls. Welcome home. Taxpayer, this is Dark Whisper. If you're still here, still breathing, still listening, you've already been marked. So, like, subscribe, and keep your lights on tonight, because someone's been waiting a long time to collect what's yours. Story 4.
It starts on the outskirts of El Paso, where the wind crawls through broken windows like a dying breath. There's an old farmhouse there, burned at the edges. Its paint blistered and peeled like old skin. Teenagers called it the tax house because it was seized long ago, property of the state, left to rot. But locals said it was more than just unpaid bills that drove the owners away. Something lived inside. The first story came from a boy named Miles. He was 17 when he and his 3 friends broke into the house one summer night. They wanted to film a dare for YouTube, 24 hours in the abandoned tax house. The first few hours were all laughs and flashlights, until around 2:30 a.m., when the power banks died and the air grew so still that they could hear the rafters breathing. Miles said he woke up to the sound of someone walking, not footsteps, but dragging, like someone's feet were bare and heavy. He turned on his phone light, and the beam caught a shape crouched in the corner. It looked like an old man, spine bent, arms too long. When the light hit its eyes, they didn't blink. They reflected, and then it smiled, slow, cracking its face open like splitting wood. Miles screamed. When police found him the next morning on the road, he had walked 12 miles barefoot. His feet were bleeding, and his phone was still recording. The other 3 were never found. But that house wasn't alone. There's another one in Midland, hidden behind a wall of dead pecan trees. It was repossessed after the owner, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Harlan, vanished. Locals say she'd gone mad after losing her pension, scribbling tax forms on the walls, begging the collectors to stop coming. Decades later, a couple of hitchhikers slept there. They said they woke to scratching paper, tearing, pen scraping. In the morning, every wall was covered again in fresh writing, names, addresses, numbers. One name was theirs. One address was the motel they planned to stay at the next night. They didn't. They left the state and never came back. Further east. In Tyler, there's a house that doesn't exist on any record. Folks just call it the collector's place. You can only find it after dark, when the humidity is thick and the frogs stop croaking. The story goes that people who owe debts, tax, money, time, are drawn there in their dreams first. Then, one day, they take a wrong turn and end up standing before it, even though they swore they'd never seen it before. Inside, it's quiet, too quiet. The air tastes like dust and old blood. There's furniture, yes, but it's covered in sheets, stitched from something coarse and strange. One man said he lifted a corner of one, and it was skin-thin, stretched, almost translucent. His own handwriting was carved on it, his signature, from a tax form he'd filed years ago. He never went back. The fourth story belongs to a woman named Clarissa. She worked for the state, a tax assessor in San Angelo. Her job was to inspect foreclosed homes before resale. One summer, she entered a small property on County Road 9. Everything was intact. Photos on the wall, toys on the floor, dinner still rotting on the table. It looked like the family had vanished mid-meal, but she noticed something off. All the clocks had stopped at 3:17. Even her phone glitched and froze. She felt something breathing behind her, soft but steady, and when she turned around, she saw her own shadow moving against the wall, only she wasn't moving. The shadow raised its arm, then pointed toward the back door. She ran. The house was condemned the next week. She quit her job and moved to Colorado. She still won't go near any house with boarded windows. By the time the stories reached the 10th house, the one in Amarillo, people had started calling them the tax houses. There were maps drawn, blogs written, YouTubers making lists. But the strange thing was, the houses kept changing. Some burned down, some were demolished, and new ones appeared, always marked as government seized, always empty, always waiting. Asterisk, one of the darkest tales came from a man named Eric, a storm chaser who took shelter in one during a tornado watch. He said the house smelled of wet dirt and copper. While the wind howled outside, he felt the floor shift, like something crawling underneath. Then the sound of whispering, faint, but close. It wasn't one voice. It was hundreds. He said they were praying, begging. When he turned on his light, he saw shapes pressed under the wallpaper, faces, mouths open, in silent screams. He blacked out and woke up in his car, parked miles away. His dash cam showed nothing, except at 2:37 a.m., the radio turned on by itself, playing an old voice repeating, "Taxes unpaid, debt eternal." Asterisk, people began to say, these weren't just houses. They were places that remember. Every owner who'd ever lost their property, every family broken by bills or foreclosure, left a piece of themselves there. Grief, rage, hopelessness. It built up over decades, feeding something that wasn't human anymore. Something that waited for those who disrespected the ruins, the trespassers, the daredevils who thought ghosts were just stories. Asterisk. And then came the 20th account, the one that made even the locals stop talking. A group of paranormal investigators called Lone Star Explorers decided to spend Halloween night inside all the tax houses they could find in a single night. They live-streamed the whole thing. The first few hours were normal laughter, exploration, shadows, sounds. But around 3 a.m., their stream cut out. When it came back on the next morning, the feed showed only one camera still active, pointed at a cracked mirror. You could see the reflection of the living room, and behind the camera, figures began to appear. First one, then another, and another, all pale, still, with faces that looked too familiar. Viewers realized they were the missing people. Miles, Mrs. Harlan, the hitchhikers, Eric, Clarissa. One by one, they turned toward the camera, mouths opening, whispering together, "Pay what you owe." Asterisk, police found the team's van abandoned on a dirt road near Waco. Inside were their IDs, gear, and a single note scribbled in black ink. Asterisk, some debts don't end when you die. Asterisk, and if you ever find yourself driving through rural Texas, and you see an old wooden sign marked property of the state, don't stop. Don't even look too long, because once you see a tax house, it sees you back. And one night, when you're tired, when you think you've escaped it, you'll hear that same whisper through the walls. Asterisk, welcome home, taxpayer. This is Dark Whisper. If you're still here, still breathing, still listening, you've already been marked. So like, subscribe, and keep your lights on tonight, because someone's been waiting a long time to collect what's yours. Asterisk.
Story 5 Asterisk. It started in a dusty town outside Abilene, where the nights stretched too long, and the wind always seems to whisper a name you don't remember saying. The house stood at the end of a dead road, minus 2417 Route D, known to locals as the Hacienda, once owned by an oil contractor who disappeared with his whole family in the late 80s. It had been rented out a dozen times since. Every tenant left within months, sometimes without warning. The property taxes were always mysteriously paid, not by a person, but through anonymous cashier's checks that arrived at the courthouse every spring. No name, no return address. Asterisk, the story that got out started with a woman named Evelyn Moore. She was 42, recently divorced and looking for a fresh start. Cheap rent, wide yard, quiet neighbors, it looked perfect on paper. She didn't ask why it was cheap, she should have. Asterisk, her first week was fine. The place smelled like cedar and dust, and every night she'd light candles and read by the window, watching the Texas sun bleed out over the fields. But on the 8th night, she heard footsteps upstairs. She lived alone. She brushed it off as raccoons or wood shifting in the heat. But the next morning, all the picture frames in the hallway were turned to face the wall. Asterisk, that was the first time she noticed the extra door. Asterisk, it was at the end of the upstairs hallway, small, almost child-sized, painted the same color as the wall. She swore it hadn't been there when she moved in. When she touched the knob, it was cold. She didn't open it. Not then. Asterisk, weeks passed. She started losing sleep. Sometimes, at 3 a.m., she'd hear whispering through the vents. Not words. Exactly. Just soft mumbling, like someone counting under their breath. Other times, she'd wake to find small, wet footprints on the kitchen floor, leading from the back door to the hallway. She checked the locks every night after that. Still, the prints kept coming. Then came the smell. It started faint, like old soil or rainwater sitting too long. Within days, it grew stronger, metallic, sickly, sweet. She searched everywhere, but couldn't find the source. Even pest control found nothing. But they did notice something else in the attic. Tucked behind insulation were 13 handprints smeared on the wooden beams, all child's. Each print had been burned into the wood. Asterisk that night. Evelyn dreamed she was standing in front of the small door, hearing knocking from the other side. A child's voice whispered, "Let me out. It's my turn." She woke up drenched in sweat, the knocking still faintly echoing through the walls. Asterisk. She finally opened the door the next morning. Asterisk inside was a narrow crawl space, just big enough to crouch in. The air smelled like rot. At the far end was something wrapped in a blanket, old, stiff, and heavy. She tugged it, and it fell open. Inside were dolls. 13 of them, made of fabric and hair. Real hair. Each had a name stitched on its chest. 12 names were faded, but one was fresh, the thread bright red. It read, Evelyn, asterisk. The police came, but they found nothing. No dolls, no hidden door. They told her stress was making her imagine things, but they didn't stay long in that house. One of the officers later told a friend that while walking through the hall, he'd heard small feet running behind him. When he turned around, the door was there again shut, but humming. Asterisk Evelyn moved out that same night. She didn't take anything with her except her car keys and a single suitcase. She drove to her sister's house in Dallas and refused to talk about it again. But 3 weeks later, her sister found her car parked in front of a different abandoned house in Fort Worth, engines still running. Driver's door open, radio playing softly. No sign of Evelyn. Asterisk, the authorities traced the car's GPS. It showed she'd driven directly from her sister's house to that abandoned property, and had stopped 5 times along the way, each time at the site of a foreclosed home. All of them were old tax houses. Asterisk, when they went to the last one, -2417 Route D, it was gone. Nothing but a foundation, and in the middle of it, a single door standing upright, nailed into nothing. The handle was cold. Asterisk locals say the house still appears sometimes, not for long, not to everyone. They call it the 13th tenant's house. Each time it returns, it calls to someone new. Someone who's lonely. Someone who's trying to start over. They say the next tenant is already chosen. And if you ever rent a house in Texas, any house, count the doors. If there's one more than you remember, don't open it. Story 6. It's a story the locals don't tell anymore, not out loud. The kind of thing you overhear whispered in the corner of a bar when the lights flicker or when the jukebox cuts off mid-song. They say the water out near Lake Whitney, west of Hillsborough, isn't right. It looks calm, glassy, and silent, but sometimes if you listen long enough, you can hear it whispering under the ripples, and sometimes it whispers your name. Asterisk, back in 1998. There was a small group of college friends from Waco who liked exploring forgotten parts of Texas ghost towns, floodplains, condemned houses, things like that. They called themselves the Wanderers. There were 5 of them: Jason, Lena, Matt, Cody, and Sarah. On Memorial Day weekend, they rented a cabin near Lake Whitney, one of those old ones built before the dam expansion. The cabin didn't show up on the modern maps, but they found it listed on a paper flyer stapled to a gas station board. Lakeview Haven, $75 a night. No neighbors. No questions. Asterisk, they drove out there that Friday. Dirt road, tall weeds, long stretches of silence. The kind of road where your cell signal dies before you notice. The cabin was smaller than they expected, half swallowed by vines. The porch sagged, the windows clouded over. But the lake was beautiful. It lay still, like a mirror reflecting the dying light. Lena said it looked too perfect. No ripples, no sound, no wind. Jason laughed and said, "Guess we're the only ones stupid enough to camp near a dead lake." Asterisk, the first night was fine. Beer, music, laughter. But near midnight, Sarah said she heard something outside, a low hum, like someone singing underwater. They all stepped out to listen. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, silver and black. Then, faintly, a voice rose up, slow, drawn out, almost like someone calling a name. Jason. Jason froze. He turned to the others, thinking they were playing a trick. But the voice came again, closer this time. Jaaa, son. They left the fire burning that night and locked the doors. No one slept. The next morning, Jason went down to the water to prove it was nothing. He shouted his name, his voice echoing back across the stillness. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, the echo changed. Jason. Soft, clear, not his own. It came from under the surface. He laughed it off again, but the others didn't. That afternoon, they tried to fish, but their lines snagged on something heavy. When they pulled it up, it wasn't a log. It was an old license plate, half rusted, half clean, as if it had just been placed there. The plate number matched Jason's old truck. The one he'd sold years ago. By nightfall, they were packing up. They planned to leave first thing in the morning. But sometime around 2 a.m., the humming returned louder, insistent. They looked outside and saw the lake glowing faintly blue, like moonlight trapped beneath the surface. Then came the names Lena, Matt, Cody, Sarah, each one drawn out in that same drowning voice. They ran. Jason grabbed the keys, but when he tried to start the car, it just clicked. No power. The radio turned on by itself, static, then whispering. It was Jason's own voice, playing back something he'd never said. Come down to the water. It's warm tonight. By morning, a fisherman found the cabin empty. No signs of struggle, just wet footprints leading from the porch to the dock. 5 sets. The last set disappeared at the edge of the lake. Police searched for days, divers went down, but they found nothing. Not a trace. Not a sound. Months later, a ranger found something new by the shore. 5 driver's licenses lying side by side in the mud, faces still visible, all of them from the wanderers. They were dry, perfectly dry, and the names had been scratched out, one by one. Since then, people who stay near Lake Whitney sometimes hear their names when the air is still. Always near water, always close to midnight. It's never a shout, never a scream. Just a whisper that sounds too familiar. Some say the lake remembers those who come too close. Others say it takes them, keeps them beneath. Forever whispering for company. A few summers ago, a group of YouTubers tried to film there at night. Their video never went up, but a single frame leaked online. It showed the reflection of the lake, smooth, dark, and 5 pale faces just below the surface. Eyes open, mouths wide, whispering bubbles. Locals have a rule now. They don't camp near that side of the lake. They don't fish there. And they never, ever answer when they hear someone call their name from the water. Because once the lake knows your name, it doesn't forget. Story 7. It starts out past Pecos, where Highway 67 cuts through miles of scrubland, long, empty stretches of blacktop that vanish into nothing. Truckers say that somewhere between mile marker 223 and 229, the road changes. Not visibly, not at first. The air just feels thicker, heavier, and the silence grows deeper than it should. You could shout your lungs out, and it would sound like you were screaming underwater. The first known story came from a trucker named Don Ellison. He'd been driving that route for 20 years, mostly at night to avoid traffic. He told people that the hum started around 3 in the morning, a low vibration under the wheels, like a bass note playing from the asphalt itself. It wasn't coming from his rig. He turned off the radio, the engine, everything. Still, the road hummed. It was almost like it was breathing. When he checked his mirrors, there were lights behind him, 2 faint orbs that looked like another truck. But no matter how fast he went, they stayed exactly the same distance back. He radioed for other drivers, but the channel just hissed static. That's when the humming grew louder, changing pitch, turning into something like a deep, wet groan. He said he pulled over to check his tires and saw something impossible. The asphalt was rippling. like water in a pond after a stone drops. When he touched it, it felt warm, alive. Don stopped driving nights after that, but he wasn't the only one. Over the next few years, dozens of travelers vanished along that stretch. Tourists, long-haul drivers, even locals heading home from late shifts. Their cars were found days later, perfectly parked on the shoulder, doors open, engines off, hazard lights blinking. No bodies, no tracks, just the faint hum still coming from the pavement beneath. The state finally sent surveyors to inspect the road. They brought sensors, ground-penetrating radar, all of it. What they found made one of them quit on the spot. Under the asphalt, where there should have been rock and soil, there was a void, a hollow space stretching for miles. The equipment picked up faint movement inside, something shifting, something large. The official report said it was a natural sinkhole formation, though no one ever proved it. They repaved the road anyway, poured fresh tar and gravel over it. For a while, the hum stopped, but then, one night in late August, it came back. A teenage couple from Alpine, Ben and Rosie, were driving home after a football game. They took the long way, Highway 67, because Rosie liked the stars out there. She was filming on her phone when the sound started. Low rhythmic, like a generator buried underground. The footage still exists, though most copies were deleted after what people noticed. In the last minute of the clip, the hum turns into voices. Dozens of them, layered over one another, whispering in a language no one's identified. Then, just before the video cuts out, Rosie says, "Ben, do you see that?" The headlights catch something standing in the middle of the road. A figure, pale and thin, clothes torn, face blank. Its mouth is open wide, and as the hum peaks, its chest starts to vibrate in sync with the sound. The camera drops. The video ends. Their car was found 3 days later, empty. After that, truckers stopped taking that route alone. But every now and then, someone new passes through, people who don't believe the stories. A tourist, a college kid, a lost traveler. And they come back talking about the hum. They say it starts soft, like a lullaby. But if you listen too long, it changes pitch until it matches your heartbeat. If you don't pull over, the road begins to blur. The yellow lines bending and twisting like they're guiding you somewhere you don't want to go. There's a rumor among highway patrol, the kind they'll deny if you ask too directly. They say the hum isn't just a sound. It's a call. And if you ever answer it, if you ever pull over and step out of your car to listen, you'll see movement under the road, like shadows shifting beneath glass. If you kneel and press your ear to the asphalt, you'll hear something whisper your name. Then, thank you. No one knows what lives under Highway 67. Some say it's the remains of an old river that runs deep underground. Others say it's something older, something that remembers when Texas was ocean. Something hungry. Every year, more asphalt gets poured, more repairs made, and still the hum keeps coming back, louder, closer, deeper. And sometimes, when the night's just right and the wind dies down, you can hear it from miles away, that low trembling note that sounds like the earth itself moaning beneath your feet. So if you ever find yourself driving that road past midnight, and your tires start to sing, don't slow down. Don't listen. Don't stop. Because the hum doesn't want you to leave. It wants you to pull over and become part of the song. Story 8. It's an old legend along Highway 281. Just south of Wichita Falls. A 2-lane road where the grass grows high and the billboards peel into gray shreds. There's a stretch of it that no one really talks about. Because somewhere along that empty highway sits a motel that shouldn't exist anymore. Its name flickers in half-lit. Neon letters, sunset in vacancy. But the thing is, there's no record of any Sunset in that area. No license, no ownership, nothing. Still, travelers keep finding it when they're too tired to drive any farther. Some wake up miles away, parked on the shoulder, with no memory of how they got there. Others don't wake up at all. The first account came from a man named Harold Green. He was a delivery driver heading from Dallas to Amarillo, doing an overnight run. His GPS glitched around 1:20 a.m., rerouting him through a side road that wasn't on his usual map. His fuel was low, so when he saw the flickering neon sign, "Sunset in Vacancy," he pulled in. The lot was empty. The air felt thick, like a storm was coming. Inside, the front desk bell didn't work, so he called out. A woman appeared from the back, tall, pale, with hair the color of old straw. Her voice was flat, almost mechanical. She didn't ask for ID, just slid a form toward him and said, "Sign your name, please." Harold said the pen didn't write right, it dragged, like the paper was wet. But his name appeared anyway, in dark ink, neat and smooth. She handed him a brass key with the number 7 on it. Room 7 was clean enough. Old carpet, humming air conditioner, faint smell of lemon and dust. He showered, turned on the TV, just static, then fell asleep. He woke at 3:17 a.m. to someone knocking on his door. Slow, deliberate, 3 times. He checked the peephole, nothing. Then he noticed something wrong. His name tag from work, which he'd pinned to his jacket on the chair, was gone. The next morning, he went to check out, but there was no one at the desk. The lobby was empty. When he turned to leave, he saw the guest ledger open on the counter. His name wasn't there, but below the last listed guest, March 9, 1978, a new entry was written in the same neat handwriting. Harold Green checked in. No checkout date. He left the key and drove off fast. But when he got back to Dallas, his co-workers swore he'd already called in that morning. They'd even spoken to him. His voice, his words, his route update, but his phone log showed nothing. That was 1998. Harold quit his job. 2 months later, after waking one night to find that same brass key on his nightstand, the number 7 faintly glowing. Other stories followed. A couple from Fort Worth, honeymooners, who stayed there because it looked old-fashioned. Their families found their car in the parking lot a week later, unlocked, keys in the ignition. Room 9 was empty except for 2 sets of folded clothes on the bed and a handwritten note that said, "Thank you for your stay. You are remembered." Then there was a sheriff's deputy who went searching for the place after too many missing person reports mentioned the same neon sign. He found it on a foggy night, exactly where the stories said. He called dispatch to report it, said he was going to check inside. That was the last transmission. The next day, all they found was his cruiser engine running, headlights pointing at nothing. The motel was gone. Sometimes though, truckers still see the glow of that neon sign through the mist. They'll pass a gas station, blink, and there it is, "Sunset in Vacancy." Always flickering, always open. If you pull over, they say, you'll smell lemon cleaner and hear faint music playing from somewhere deep inside. The rooms are always ready. The sheets always turned down. And the desk clerk will always slide that form across the counter with a faint smile and say, "Sign your name, please." But the moment you do, something happens you won't feel until morning. Something takes your voice. You'll sleep soundly, but when you wake, your reflection in the mirror will blink a second too late. Your voice on the phone will sound distant, like it's coming from far away. Because you never really checked out. They say, the sunset isn't a building at all, it's a place that appears when you're too tired, too lost, too close to giving up. A resting place for the lonely, but every rest has a cost. Once you sign your name, you belong to it, forever. And the scariest part, every decade or so, people claim the motel starts advertising again. Flyers pinned to gas station boards, glowing QR codes online, even special rates listed on travel sites. Always with the same line, no neighbors. No questions. Vacancy, guaranteed. So if you're ever driving through Texas at night and see a neon sign through the fog, keep going. Don't stop, don't look. Because the Sunset Inn doesn't want guests, it wants residents. Story 9.
It began in a forgotten Texas town called Briar Ridge, halfway between Fort Stockton and nowhere. Population maybe 50 on a good day. No cell service, no working streetlights, just a one-pump gas station and a rusted radio tower that hadn't broadcast a thing in decades. But every night, at exactly 3:09 a.m., locals said the tower came alive. The static on radios would shift, hum, and then faintly voices would come through. Not DJs, not music, just whispers. And sometimes, if you listened long enough, you could hear your own name. The first recording came from a man named Caleb Dunn, a truck mechanic who worked nights out by the highway. He used an old CB radio to keep in touch with other drivers. One night, his radio picked up something strange, a faint whisper under the usual static. He thought it was interference, until it started saying, Caleb, stop looking. He froze. The voice repeated, Caleb, stop looking, He turned off the CB, unplugged it, even took the battery out, but the voice kept going, faint but clear, coming from somewhere behind him. He quit that job a week later. Others started hearing it too. A gas station clerk named Darlene swore that every night, the static from her tiny AM radio turned into breathing. Slow, deliberate, right between the stations. When she tried to change the channel, the dial would spin back on its own. Then, a mansvoice.com, deep, patient, would whisper, don't touch that. You're on the right frequency. She left the radio on after that. She said it was easier than hearing the silence. Years went by. The tower rusted, vines climbed its legs, birds stopped nesting there, but something still pulsed inside its frame. One night, a pair of college students, Mara and Josh, came through Briar Ridge, filming an Abandoned Places documentary. They'd heard about the talking tower and wanted a thrill. They set up their cameras at 2:55 a.m., aiming them at the tower. Nothing but wind and insects. Then the static started, low and dense, like a deep exhale from the earth. They leaned in, listening through the recorder's monitor. At first, it was random noise. Then words began to form. Mara, Joshua, they froze. Josh laughed nervously, thinking someone hacked their audio feed. But then the voice whispered again. This time, in Mara's voice, don't move, The air went still. The insect stopped. The static hissed like rain. Then, faintly, another sound layered beneath it. Footsteps. Heavy, wet, slow. Josh turned the camera toward the tower just as the static spiked. The metal beams began to vibrate, moaning like an animal in pain. And through the noise came dozens of voices, whispering, pleading, screaming. The sound wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was echoing from inside the tower. Their footage cuts off there. The next morning, locals found their van parked by the gas station, doors open, cameras on the seats, everything intact except for one thing. The audio recorder was still running, but the last 30 seconds were nothing but static. Hidden deep in the frequency, analysts found one faint voice whispering over and over, new signal received. Welcome, residents, After that night, the tower's hum grew louder. Travelers passing through Briar Ridge started reporting interference, GPS systems rerouting, phones turning on by themselves, white noise creeping into every speaker. Some people claimed to hear their loved ones' voices buried in it. Others said they heard themselves, not echoes, but real words, sentences they'd never said before. A man named Eli Turner was found sitting in his truck by the roadside, eyes open, smiling, CB radio crackling beside him. The tape recorded 6 hours of whispers before it went dead. The last thing his voice said, calm and almost relieved, was, I can see them now. They're not gone. They were just waiting for the signal. After that, the government fenced off the old radio tower, but people say it still broadcasts, hidden in between frequencies. Late at night, if you turn the dial slow enough, you'll find a signal that shouldn't be there, -103.7, 112.4, 67.9. It changes every week. And if you listen long enough, past the crackling, past the hum, past the faint whisper that sounds almost human, you'll start to hear something else. Something like the sound of your own voice whispering back. No one knows what the signal is, or where it comes from, but every person who's ever heard it for more than 5 minutes disappears within a year. Their devices go dead, their homes fill with static noise, and their names start showing up in recordings of other people's radios, as if the tower is collecting them, one frequency at a time. So next time your radio crackles in the dark and you hear something that sounds like breathing, don't tune in. Don't listen, because the moment you recognize your own voice whispering from the static, you're already broadcasting.
Story 10.
It happened in a small Texas town named Harper's Bend, the kind of place that seems frozen in time. One gas station, one church, a few houses leaning against the wind, and a single cell tower that blinked red all night like a heartbeat. The woman's name was Evelyn Cross. She lived alone in an old trailer just off County Road 9, surrounded by fields of dying grass and mesquite trees that creaked when the wind shifted. She worked nights, cleaning motel rooms off the highway. Quiet, thankless work, but she liked it that way. Her husband had died 5 years earlier, and since then she had learned to find peace in silence. Asterisk until the calls began. Asterisk it was a Thursday night when Evelyn's phone rang at 3:17 a.m. The screen said unknown number. Normally, she'd ignore it, but that night, something, maybe curiosity, maybe loneliness, made her answer. Asterisk, she said. Hello. Asterisk at first, there was only static. Then a faint, shaky voice whispered Evelyn. Asterisk she frowned. Who is this? Asterisk a pause. Then the voice said, you shouldn't be awake. The line went dead. She stared at the phone for a long time. The reflection of the tower's blinking red light glinting on the screen. Probably a prank, she thought, kids, or one of the motel guests messing around. She tried to go back to sleep, but something about the way the voice had said her name, soft, almost familiar, kept her awake until dawn. Asterisk the next night, the call came again. The same time, 3:17 a.m. Asterisk Evelyn, the voice whispered again. Asterisk she hesitated. Who is this? Asterisk, don't answer next time, it said. He can hear us. Then silence. She dropped the phone and stared at it. The number didn't appear in her call history. No missed calls. No record at all. Just the faint hum of the trailer walls as the wind pushed through the cracks. Asterisk the next morning. Evelyn told her neighbor Howard, a retired lineman who lived a few lots over, about the calls. He laughed and said it was probably radio interference from the cell tower. Happens all the time out here, he said. Signals cross. You get some CB chatter, maybe old recordings bouncing around. Asterisk but that didn't explain the voice. It wasn't random noise. It knew her name. It spoke to her. Asterisk on the third night, she turned her phone off before bed. At 3:17 a.m., she woke up anyway, not from the phone ringing, but from the sound of it vibrating against the nightstand. The screen glowed, though she knew she'd powered it down. The same number, unknown. Asterisk, her hand trembled as she answered. What do you want from me? Asterisk the voice, this time was clearer. .com, low, and far too close. He's outside. Asterisk her heart dropped. She turned toward the window. Through the thin curtain, she saw the faint glow of headlights down the dirt road. Still, UNMOVING. Asterisk, she whispered. Who's outside? Asterisk, the voice replied. Don't open the door. Whatever he says, don't let him in. Then the line went dead again. Seconds later, someone knocked on her door. 3 soft knocks. Then, silence. Asterisk, she didn't move, didn't breathe. Asterisk, the knocking came again. This time harder. Evelyn, a man's voice called from outside. It's me, Howard. You okay? Asterisk, her chest loosened a little. It was just her neighbor. She went to the window and peeked out. Sure enough, it was Howard, standing on her porch, wearing his old jacket. His pickup idled behind him, headlights glowing dim in the dust. Asterisk, but something about him looked wrong. His head was tilted slightly too far to one side, his eyes fixed on the door handle like he wasn't really looking at it. Asterisk Howard, she said through the glass. Asterisk he didn't blink. You should open up, it's cold out here. Asterisk her phone buzzed again in her hand. She didn't want to look, but she did. The same unknown number. Asterisk when she answered, the whisper came again. That's not Howard. Asterisk the thing outside began knocking faster, harder, the wood splintering under each hit. Evelyn, it yelled. Let me in. The voice cracked, twisting between tones, deeper, rougher, like static, tearing through flesh. Asterisk Evelyn stumbled backward, clutching her phone. What are you? Asterisk the voice on the phone whispered. Don't speak to it. Don't see it. Asterisk the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Asterisk then, she heard it breathing, not outside the door, but inside the trailer. Behind her, asterisk her phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. The call was still connected. The voice on the other end whispered one last thing. Asterisk run. Asterisk when police arrived the next morning, called by Howard, the real one, they found Evelyn's trailer door wide open. Her phone on the floor, still displaying unknown number connected. There were no footprints in the dirt, no sign of struggle. But the phone was still picking up faint static. Asterisk and audio tech later examined the recording. He found something buried under the static, a voice repeating the same phrase, over and over. Asterisk, she answered. She's on the line now. Asterisk, Evelyn was never found. But ever since that night, people driving down County Road 9 report their phones ringing around 3:17 a.m. The screen always says, unknown number. Asterisk, and if you answer, you'll hear a woman's voice whisper, asterisk, don't open the door.
Story 11.
There's a lake out past Hollow Creek, Texas, that doesn't show up on any modern maps. Old folks call it Mirror Lake, though most don't speak of it anymore. It's small, maybe half a mile across, surrounded by pine and cypress that have grown thick enough to blot out the sun. The air there is colder still, heavy, like it remembers things it shouldn't. Asterisk locals say the lake used to be deeper. They say it used to move, to breathe. That's what Tom and Rachel Gibson were told when they bought the land. 20 acres of quiet country property and a murky lake out back. They thought they'd found a dream, peace, privacy, and an escape from the city. Asterisk, but the thing about Mirror Lake is, it doesn't reflect what's in front of it. It reflects what's beneath. Asterisk, it began the first night they moved in. Rachel went outside to smoke, barefoot in the cool grass, the frogs singing in the distance. She stood at the edge of the lake and stared at her reflection. But it wasn't right. The image shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. And for a heartbeat, just one, her reflection didn't smile back. Asterisk, she blinked. And it was normal again. Asterisk, she told Tom, who laughed it off. You're tired, he said. Long drive, new house, creepy water, your brain's playing tricks. Asterisk, but the next night, it happened again. This time, her reflection turned away before she did, as though something underneath the surface had moved independently. Asterisk, that was when she stopped going near the lake. Asterisk, 2 weeks later, their dog, Daisy, went missing. They found her collar floating in the shallows, the metal buckle bent like it had been crushed in a vise. There were no tracks leading in or out, no ripples, just still water. Asterisk, after that, the house changed. The nights grew quieter. The frogs stopped croaking. Even the wind seemed to die before reaching their property line. Asterisk, Tom tried to fix things by taking a boat out one morning. He said he'd drop a line, catch some fish, clear his head. Rachel watched him row into the mist until he disappeared completely. Asterisk, an hour passed. Then too, she called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. By dusk, she saw the boat again, drifting back on its own, empty. Asterisk, the police came. Divers searched for days. No sign of him. They said the lake was deeper than it should have been, unnaturally deep. One diver said before refusing to go back down. He claimed something moved down there. Big, slow, like a body, dragging chains across the silt. Asterisk, Rachel stayed on the property another week, unable to leave. Grief turned to obsession. She started sitting at the lake's edge every night, staring at her reflection, hoping to see Tom's face beside hers. Asterisk, on the 5th night, she did. Asterisk, he was standing right behind her, in the reflection, pale eyes open, dripping wet. But when she turned, there was nothing there. Asterisk, when she looked back down, the reflection of Tom smiled. Not lovingly, too wide, too still. Then his hand, or the reflection of it, reached up from beneath the water and pressed against the surface. As though he were inside the mirror, trapped behind the glassy layer of the lake. Asterisk, Rachel screamed and stumbled backward. But the water didn't ripple. It stayed perfectly still, as if nothing had happened. Asterisk, the next morning, her car was gone. Neighbors assumed she'd left, but her clothes were still in the house. Her shoes, her phone, her purse, all untouched. Asterisk, only one thing changed. A second chair appeared by the edge of the lake. Facing the water, no one visits the property anymore. It's been abandoned for years. But every so often, hikers who stray too close say they see shapes sitting by the water at dusk, unmoving figures, staring down into the reflection. And if you stand close enough to look for yourself, you'll see faces under the surface too clear, too alive to be illusions. Asterisk, some say they're the Gibsons. Others say the lake keeps everyone who's ever looked into it long enough to see themselves wrong. Asterisk, a local deputy once tested it with a drone camera. The footage showed the lake from above calm, dark, silent. But when they reviewed the reflection on the water's surface, it showed something else. The drone hovering above dozens of human figures standing in the trees. Their faces pale and eyes wide, watching from the shadows. Asterisk, when they went back to the spot, there was nothing there. Just the quiet, endless stillness of Mirror Lake. Asterisk, the last person who tried to drain it, a contractor named Dean Weller, didn't come home that night. His truck was found parked on the dirt road nearby, engine running, on the dash. His phone recorded a final message. Asterisk, the water. It's not water anymore. It's looking back. Asterisk, and still, to this day, Mirror Lake waits silent, smooth as glass. They say, if you go there on a still night and lean over the edge, you can hear whispers coming from below, soft as breath. Asterisk, stay a while. Asterisk, and if you listen too long, you'll see your reflection, smile before you do. Asterisk. Story 12. It started with a whisper. Not from the wind, not from a person, but from the house itself. Asterisk, in the heart of Briar Hollow, Texas, a town that hasn't seen a new family move in for 20 years. There stood an old farmhouse that everyone simply called the Linton Place. It had been empty for decades. After the Linton family vanished one night in 1984, they were never found. Only the house remained, the walls streaked with soot and time, windows cloudy with age, the front door hanging slightly open, as if still waiting for someone to come home. Asterisk, that someone turned out to be Ellen Marks. Asterisk, Ellen was a real estate photographer from Houston. When her company asked her to document the property for a potential buyer, she laughed it off. That place, the haunted one, she joked. But when they doubled her pay for the job, she agreed. She'd seen plenty of creepy houses before, sagging porches, moldy walls, even the occasional squatters. She didn't believe in ghosts, But the Linton house was different. The road leading to it was swallowed by trees. Branches twisted like ribs over the path. Her GPS cut out 5 miles from the property, forcing her to follow faded wooden signs. The air grew colder as she drove. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. When she finally pulled up to the house, it was just as people described. Tall, gray, leaning slightly to one side. The front door creaked open wider as if it had been waiting. Inside, it smelled like rot and dust. Wallpaper hung loose like shedding skin. Her camera's flash lit up decades of neglect, children's drawings on the walls, a broken crib, dishes still sitting in the sink, fossilized by grime. She got to work quickly, wanting to finish before dark. But as she moved from room to room, she kept hearing faint whispers behind her. Not words, more like sighs. Breaths, the kind you hear in dreams, when someone's leaning too close. In the master bedroom. Her flash caught something on the wall. Faint writing scrawled in soot, half hidden behind peeling paint. She wiped at it with her sleeve. The letters spelled, "We never sleep alone." She backed away, heart hammering. It had to be graffiti. Kids, vandals, something. But when she turned around, she saw footprints in the dust that weren't hers. Small ones, bare feet, leading toward the hallway. She followed them. They ended at a closed door at the end of the hall. The attic stairs. The handle was cold, almost damp. She hesitated, camera shaking in her hand. But the door opened before she touched it. The air that spilled out smelled sweet. Almost like flowers, wrongly sweet, like something trying too hard to imitate life. Her camera flickered. Then, through the viewfinder, she saw something the naked eye couldn't. Shapes moving in the dark. Shadows that looked almost human. And faintly a whisper. Clear this time. And coming from inside her head. Greater than don't wake us. She stumbled back, dropped the camera, and fled outside. The sunlight had turned gray. The house loomed behind her, silent and patient. She drove away without looking back. That night, she dreamed of the house. But it wasn't empty in the dream. The lights were on, the walls were clean, and a family sat at the dinner table smiling, motionless, their eyes all fixed on her. She woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. Her phone buzzed. A new email from her boss. The subject line read, "Incredible work, Ellen, beautiful shots." But she hadn't uploaded anything. She checked her camera. The files were already sent. Hundreds of photos she didn't remember taking. In every one, the rooms were lit up, like someone had turned on the power. And in the background of each photo, faint figures stood near the walls. Watching the next night, she dreamed again. The same house, the same family, only this time, one of them, a little girl, turned her head and smiled. Her lips didn't move, but Ellen heard her voice clearly. Greater than you shouldn't have left the door open. She woke up screaming. Her front door was wide open. From then on, she stopped sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she'd be back inside the Linton house, exploring rooms she'd never entered, hearing whispers crawl across the floorboards. Sometimes, in the mirror, she'd see parts of the house behind her instead of her apartment. She stopped answering calls. Her coworkers said she'd gone silent, withdrawn. One of them drove to check on her, found her car outside, lights on, and her camera lying on the kitchen counter. Still recording, the footage showed her walking into frame, eyes open but empty, speaking in a voice that wasn't hers. They don't stay in the house anymore. They come through the dream. Then she turned toward the camera and smiled too wide. She vanished after that night. When police searched her apartment, they found the SD card still in the camera. On it, hundreds of photos not of her apartment, but of the Linton house, each taken from inside different rooms, as if she'd been moving through it. The final image showed the attic door open, shadows spilling down the stairs. The file was named simply, ellensleeping.jpg. The house still stands. Locals swear its windows glow faintly at night, even though it hasn't had power since 1984, and those who dream of it, even once, say they wake up with dust on their feet, and the faint echo of a whisper fading from their ears. Greater than you left the door open to. Story 13, it sits off Highway 281, 30 miles outside Gainesville, Texas, behind a stretch of dead cotton fields and rusting billboards that advertise gas for prices that don't exist anymore. The sign reads, Sunset Motel, though the sun hasn't shined there for years. Truckers used to stay there in the 80s, families passing through on summer trips, the occasional salesman who needed a cheap room for a night. But after 1993, it stopped showing up on GPS. It wasn't demolished. It wasn't condemned. It was just forgotten until Ben Holloway found it. Ben was a traveling auto parts rep, mid-40s, divorced, always on the road. He drove through Texas for work every month, staying wherever the neon vacancy sign was still buzzing. One stormy night, he took a wrong turn and his GPS clicked. The road he was on wasn't listed, no street signs, just asphalt and lightning flashing over empty land. Asterisk, then he saw it, a flickering neon sign through the rain. Sunset Motel. Vacancy. Asterisk, he pulled in, grateful to find shelter. The building looked half-dead, paint peeling. Ice machine shattered. A single buzzing light over the office door. Inside, a man sat behind the desk, thin and pale, with eyes that didn't blink enough. Asterisk, need a room? The man asked. Asterisk, Ben nodded. The man slid a key across the counter, an old brass one. No number on it. Asterisk, cash only. The clerk said, no cards, no IDs, just names. Asterisk, Ben handed him a 20, signed the ledger, and noticed that the last name written in the book was dated 1993. The name was Carla Hines. Asterisk, he asked if the motel had Wi-Fi. The clerk smiled faintly. Not the kind you want. Asterisk, room 9 was near the end of the lot. The carpet inside smelled faintly of mildew. The walls yellowed with smoke. The TV was an old box model. No remote, just static, hissing through the screen. Asterisk, he showered, tried to sleep, but the hum of the TV wouldn't stop. Even unplugged, it buzzed faintly, like a whisper behind the wall. Around 2 a.m., he heard footsteps outside his door. Soft, deliberate. Pacing back and forth, he opened the blinds. Nothing. Then, faintly, through the TV static, came a woman's voice. Asterisk, greater than you checked in. Asterisk, Ben's stomach turned. He muted the TV. The sound kept going. He turned it off entirely, and still, the voice whispered. Asterisk, greater than you shouldn't have signed your name. Asterisk, the room temperature dropped. His breath misted in the air. Then, the sound of a key turning, his door unlocking from the outside. Asterisk, he jumped up, grabbed the knob, and yanked it open. The hallway was empty, but all the other doors were open now to all 9 rooms, lined down the corridor. Each one flickered with blue TV light, and from each came a voice, male, female, old, young, whispering the same words in unison. Asterisk, greater than you checked in. Asterisk, he stumbled backward and ran for the lobby. The clerk was gone, but the ledger lay open on the counter. The ink from his name was still wet. He tore out the page, but the paper burned hot in his hands, like it had been sitting under a lamp. Asterisk, when he looked down again, his name had disappeared. But another line had appeared beneath the last one. Benjamin Holloway checked out. October 14, 1993. Asterisk, he froze. That date was 32 years ago. Asterisk, he ran to his car. The rain had stopped. The highway lights were gone. When he looked back, the motel was completely dark, the sign flickering faintly before dying altogether. Asterisk, he drove for hours, or thought he did, but the road never changed. The same mile markers, the same bent telephone pole, the same dead raccoon on the shoulder. Finally, the headlights caught something ahead. A sign, Sunset Motel, vacancy. When police found his car, weeks later, it was sitting on a dirt road outside Gainesville. The engine was running, but the seat was empty. The motel ledger was on the passenger seat, open to a fresh page. A new line had been added. Greater than Ben Holloway, room 9. Every few years, travelers report seeing a faint neon light down that stretch of highway. They say the sign still flickers in the dark, calling out through the static on their radios. Sometimes, when they stop, they swear they see a man standing in the office window. Tall, middle-aged, wearing a suit, staring out toward the road. Asterisk, and if you listen closely, you can hear the faint buzz of a TV, and a whisper behind it, asterisk, greater than you checked in. Asterisk, if you ever see the Sunset Motel glowing in the night, keep driving. Asterisk, because once your name hits that ledger, it doesn't matter if you leave, you'll always have a room waiting. Story 14. It began with a smell. A slow, creeping rot that came up through the pipes of a small one-story house on the edge of Waco, Texas. The owner, Harriet Cole, was a retired nurse who'd lived there for over 30 years. She kept everything spotless. Bleach, lemon cleaner, candles, but nothing masked the odor. It was like damp soil and rust and something. Dead asterisk, she called the plumber twice. Both said the same thing. Nothing wrong with the pipes. Maybe an old animal under the foundation. Maybe mold. But Harriet had worked in hospitals long enough to recognize the smell. It was human. Asterisk, the odor came strongest from the bathroom sink. And at night, when the house went quiet, she swore she heard faint murmuring under the drain. Not gurgles. Not pipes. Words. Asterisk, at first, she thought it was her hearing aids acting up. But when she took them out, she still heard it. A voice, soft and low, like someone whispering through a straw. Asterisk, greater than help me. Asterisk, the first time she heard it, she dropped her toothbrush. Asterisk, she knelt down, pressed her ear to the drain, and the voice came again, clearer. Asterisk, greater than don't leave me here. Asterisk, she jerked back, heart hammering. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, the smell was gone. She told herself it was her imagination, grief, maybe, or the loneliness of old age playing tricks on her. Asterisk, but that night, the voice came again, and this time, it said her name. Asterisk, greater than Harriet. Asterisk, she froze in her bed. The sound was coming from the bathroom, faint, but insistent. Asterisk, greater than Harriet. Please. Asterisk, it was a man's voice, trembling, familiar. She stood in the doorway and whispered, "Who's there?" "You know me," the voice said. Her knees went weak. It sounded like her husband, Daniel, dead for 15 years. She ran from the room, shaking, sat on the couch with every light on until morning. The next day, she poured bleach down every drain, the fumes stinging her eyes. But when the liquid hissed into the pipes, she swore she heard someone screaming beneath it, not loud, but muffled, like through water. That night, the smell returned. Then came the water stains, dark shapes creeping up from the floorboards near the bathroom door, forming almost like footprints. She could hear water dripping behind the walls, even though the faucets were off. She called the plumber again. He went into the crawl space beneath the house. 10 minutes later, he crawled back out, pale and sweating. "There's something down there," he said. "A hole, it goes deeper than it should." He refused to go back under. Harriet spent the rest of the day listening. The voice returned, soft and pleading. "Greater than it's cold down here." By the third night, it wasn't just the sink. The bathtub drain began whispering to two voices, overlapping, one begging, one crying. Sometimes she could hear knocking in the pipes, like fists hitting metal. She tried calling the church. The priest came, sprinkled holy water, muttered prayers. But as he did, the drain laughed, a sound like air forcing itself through wet flesh. The priest left halfway through the blessing and never came back. That evening, the drain began to speak clearly. Not whispers, sentences, whole conversations. Greater than we remember you. You washed your hands, didn't you? You thought it would stay buried. She ran to the mirror, gripping the sink, screaming for it to stop. But the drain answered with her own voice, mocking, echoing her words back seconds after she spoke. She smashed the mirror. The police found her a week later, missing. The house smelled of mold and iron. The bathroom sink was filled with dark water. But when they tried to drain it, nothing moved. The plumber they brought in said it was blocked by something soft. They never found her body. Months later, new owners moved in, a couple with a baby. They remodeled, replaced all the plumbing, and thought nothing of the history. But the wife started hearing noises when she bathed the child, faint, rhythmic tapping under the drain. One night, she heard something that made her freeze. A whisper, almost gentle. Greater than don't let her go down here. Please. The husband thought she was imagining it until he recorded it. When they played the audio back, the voice on the recording was distorted, layered. But one phrase was unmistakable. Greater than we're still waiting for her. They moved out within the week. The city condemned the property last year, but workers say whenever they dig around that part of the foundation, the soil is wet, even in drought. And sometimes, when the wind dies, you can hear a faint trickling sound, like water running somewhere far below, like something alive. And if you ever hear your drain, whisper back when you're alone. Don't answer, because once you do, it knows your name, and it never forgets a voice. Story 15 *. They still talk about it along the highways west of Dallas. A place called Dover's Rest. You won't find it on maps anymore. Not because it was small or forgotten, but because it was erased. Not abandoned, not destroyed, just gone. Old truckers say you can sometimes see its sign in the fog. A rusted board swinging in the wind, off Route 22. Reading, "Welcome to Dover's Rest. Population 212. But if you blink, it's gone. Back in 1986, Dover's Rest was a quiet farming town surrounded by fields of mesquite and red clay. It had one gas station, one diner, a small Baptist church, and a two-room sheriff's office. Life there was slow, predictable, until that August night. It began with the static. Shortwave radios, CBS, even televisions, everything filled with this low, humming distortion, like bees trapped inside the wires. People said it wasn't just sound. You could feel it in your teeth, your bones. Dogs barked nonstop. Cows broke fences and ran. Streetlights flickered until they burst. Sheriff Earl Matheson drove through town. Lights flashing, shouting at people to stay indoors. But nobody listened. They stood on their porches, staring at the horizon. The air shimmered, like heat waves on asphalt, but thicker alive somehow. A storm, people thought, but there were no clouds, no wind, just this strange ripple, rolling toward town from the empty fields. Then came the lights, white, pulsing like lightning, frozen in midair, stretching across the fields in perfect, geometric patterns, squares, circles, and long, jagged lines that never touched the ground. They burned silently, hovering inches above the earth. When Earl stepped out of his truck, his radio started hissing. Greater than Earl. Don't look at it. He froze. The voice wasn't from dispatch. It was his wife's voice, but she was home, miles away. He dropped the radio. From that point on, everything anyone remembered happened in pieces, sounds, flashes, fragments of moments stitched together like nightmares. At 11:58 p.m., the town's power went out completely. At 11:59, the sky turned the color of old bruises. Asterisk, and at exactly midnight, Dover's Rest stopped existing. 3 days later, state police found the place, or what was left of it. Asterisk, the town wasn't ruined. It was empty. Asterisk, every house, every car, every storefront, perfectly intact. Doors unlocked, meals still on tables, laundry still wet on clotheslines, but no people, not a single body. Asterisk, the air smelled like burnt metal, and in the center of Main Street, carved deep into the asphalt, was a circle 15 feet wide, scorched black. No sign of fire, just a smooth, melted impression, as if the road had liquefied for a second. Asterisk, inside that circle, the ground, HUMMED. Asterisk, scientists, FBI agents, even the military came through. No one stayed longer than an hour. Their instruments went haywire. One geologist said it felt like the earth was breathing. Then they sealed the place off. Locals said they could still see lights from miles away at night. Farmers heard voices on their radios, whispering names, reciting Bible verses backwards. Asterisk 1, rancher swore that when he drove near the old county line, his headlights flickered, and for a split second, he saw people standing in the road. Dover's Rest residents. Motionless, their eyes reflecting white light like cats. Then they were gone. Asterisk, by 1988, the government bulldozed the area, planted grass, and renamed the stretch Federal Range 14. The rumor was they buried something there, not just evidence, but something alive. Asterisk, but the strangest part. Asterisk, a week before the disappearance, a local photographer named Clara Voss mailed a roll of film to her sister in Austin. The photos showed Dover's Rest, the diner, the church, the fields. But the last image was wrong. Asterisk, it showed Main Street at night. A long exposure shot, the sky was full of streaks of light, spiraling downward. And right in the middle stood a figure, tall, thin, like it was made of fog, and behind it dozens of human silhouettes, half-formed, reaching out toward the lens. Asterisk, Clara's sister turned the film over to authorities. It disappeared to asterisk now. Truckers say that sometimes, late at night, when the fog rolls over Route 22, their radios cut out, and if they look in the rearview mirror, they can see a faint glow behind them like streetlights from a town that shouldn't be there. Asterisk, some even claim if you stop, you can hear faint music, a jukebox playing through static, the sound of glasses clinking, laughter, the echo of a life that ended in silence. Asterisk, and then, a voice, so quiet it feels like it's right behind your ear. Asterisk, greater than you shouldn't have stopped here. If you ever find yourself driving that road and your GPS flickers, keep driving. Don't slow down. Don't look at the fog. And whatever you do, if you see a sign that says Welcome to Dover's Rest, turn around. Asterisk, because once you pass that sign, you don't come back. Story 16, in a forgotten stretch of land outside Lubbock, Texas, there's a dirt road called Hollow Creek Lane. Most GPS apps don't even register it anymore. It's barely a path now, overgrown with weeds, broken fences, leaning toward each other like they're whispering secrets. At the end of that road stands a 2-story farmhouse, sunken, rotted, and half swallowed by the earth. Locals call it the breathing house. Asterisk, it got the name from the sound. People say if you stand close enough to the porch at night, when the wind dies and the crickets go silent, you can hear it exhale, slow, deep, and wet, like something inside is alive. Asterisk, back in 1997, a man named Richard Lang bought that property cheap at an auction. He was a contractor from Amarillo, planning to flip it and sell it to a Dallas developer. The papers said it had been abandoned for decades after the previous owners vanished during a thunderstorm in the 70s. Asterisk, Richard wasn't superstitious. He'd worked in plenty of old houses. But this one felt wrong from the start. Asterisk, the first night he arrived, he set up a cot in the living room. The floors were dusty, and the wallpaper peeled like dead skin. But as he lay there, he started to notice something strange. The boards under him moved. Asterisk, not from wind, not from settling. Asterisk, they rose and fell gently, rhythmically, like the house itself was breathing. He thought it was a trick of his mind. Until, just before sleep, the house exhaled a low groan that shook dust from the rafters. Asterisk, he sat up. The air smelled like rot and old blood. The next morning, he found his coffee mug cracked on the counter and small wet footprints leading from the kitchen to the hallway. They were too small to be his. By the third day, he'd stopped sleeping upstairs. He said, the second floor whispered. The sound came through the vents' voices, faint and ragged, speaking in a low broken rhythm. Asterisk, he couldn't make out the words, but they weren't random. They were in sync with the sound of the house's breathing. Inhale, whispers rise. Exhale, silence. Asterisk, on the fourth night, he found something. Asterisk, behind a false wall in the basement, he uncovered a small wooden door, nailed shut and sealed with wax. On it, written in what looked like black tar, was a sentence. Asterisks greater than do not open while it sleeps. Asterisk, Richard, being stubborn and curious, pried it open. Inside was a narrow space filled with straw, bones, and something else, something like a cocoon made of webbing and hair. Asterisk, he touched it. It was warm. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, The entire house shuddered. Every wall creaked at once, as if gasping awake. The light bulbs flickered. The air turned heavy, like underwater pressure. Asterisk, then he heard it, not from the basement, but from inside the walls. Asterisk, greater than, why did you wake me? Asterisk, he stumbled back, hitting his head on the stairs. When he looked up, he swore he saw something move through the plaster, long, pale shapes pressing against the walls like hands trapped behind skin. Asterisk, he fled that night, leaving his tools and clothes behind. Asterisk, but he came back 2 days later to apologize. He said, to put it back to sleep. The police found his truck at the gate. The keys were still in the ignition. The door open, but Richard was gone. Asterisk, inside the house. The walls had changed. They looked swollen, like something was pushing from the inside. The air was damp and warm, too warm, like breath. Asterisk, they never found Richard, but on the wall, above the basement door, someone had written in jagged letters, "It's dreaming again." Asterisk, the county condemned the property after that. No one's lived there since, but hunters say if you walk past Hollow Creek on cold nights, you can see fog leaking from under the porch. Sometimes it comes out in slow bursts. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Asterisk, one group of teens snuck in back in 2014. They filmed the whole thing for YouTube. The camera lasted 11 minutes before the lens fogged over and the mic began to pulse, perfectly in rhythm with the sound of breathing. Asterisk, when authorities found the camera 3 weeks later, it was half sunk into the living room floor. Still recording, the last 2 seconds of the video showed something huge, moving in the corner, something that didn't have eyes or a mouth, but lungs, and it was still breathing. Story 17 asterisk, it sits off Highway 67, somewhere between Abilene and San Angelo, or maybe it doesn't. Ask 10 drivers where it is, and you'll get 10 different answers. Some say it appears only at night, when the fog rolls thick over the blacktop. Others say it only shows up when you're alone, low on gas, and desperate for a place to rest. They call it the Lone Star Motel, a glowing neon sign that flickers vacancy in red, though no one's ever seen it turned OFF. Asterisk, the story starts with Caleb Dorsey, a long-haul trucker who disappeared in 2003. He was headed east toward Dallas, hauling medical equipment. He'd called his wife around 10:30 p.m. to say he was stopping for the night. His voice on the call sounded off, slow, distracted. Asterisk, he told her he'd found a little motel that wasn't on the map. He said the woman at the front desk looked like she hadn't slept in years, but she was kind. Gave him a room for cash only. That was the last anyone heard from him. When police found his rig 2 weeks later, it was parked on the shoulder of 67 engine, running, fuel full, driver's door open. His wallet and phone were inside. No sign of a motel anywhere, just miles of empty desert. 2 years later, another driver, Alicia Ramos, told a story on a CB radio forum that chilled everyone. She said she'd been driving through the same stretch when her headlights caught a flicker of red light in the distance. Vacancy, it was 2:12 a.m. She was exhausted, running on fumes, so she pulled in. Asterisk, the motel looked off to clean. The pavement was black, smooth, and the air smelled like rain even though the sky was bone dry. Asterisk, a bell rang when she opened the lobby door. A woman sat behind the counter, staring at her. Her eyes were pale, almost colorless, and her lips moved just a fraction slower than her words. Asterisk, welcome to the Lone Star Motel, she said. Asterisk, one night, Alicia nodded. The clerk handed her an old-fashioned metal key with a tag that read, Room 7. Then she smiled wide and stiff, like her face wasn't used to it, and said something strange. Asterisk, breakfast starts at 6. Checkout is never. Asterisk, Alicia laughed, thinking it was a joke. Room 7 was freezing. Asterisk, the AC unit rattled like an engine, struggling to start. The carpet was damp. The TV came on by itself, showing static. She unplugged it, but the static didn't stop. It came from inside the walls. Asterisk, around 3:40 a.m. She heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, dragging ones. Then a knock on her door. Greater than knock, knock knock. She froze. Asterisk, housekeeping. A voice whispered, but it wasn't morning. She looked through the peephole. No one there, but the sound kept going. Footsteps, pacing, stopping, breathing. Asterisk, then the voice again. Closer now. Asterisk, greater than housekeeping. You forgot to check out. Asterisk, she turned every light on. Heart pounding. Her truck keys were gone. Asterisk, when she opened the drawer beside the bed, she found something that made her scream. A wallet, cracked leather, dusty, and inside it, an old driver's license. Caleb Dorsey. Asterisk, she ran for the door. But when she opened it, the hallway wasn't the same. It stretched endlessly, lined with flickering bulbs that hummed like flies. The exit sign at the end glowed red, but it was farther every time she took a step. The air got heavier. Then she saw them, figures in the doorways. Dozens of them. Guests, all pale, all swaying gently like they were asleep, standing up. Some had blood under their fingernails. Some were missing eyes. Asterisk, and all of them whispered the same thing, in one broken, breathless voice. Asterisk, greater than, don't forget to check out. Asterisk, Alicia ran, screaming. crying until she burst through a door that led outside. The neon sign buzzed above her. Vacancy. The parking lot was empty. Asterisk, she jumped into her truck and tore off down the highway, speeding blind through the dark. Asterisk, when she looked in the rearview mirror, she saw something impossible. The motel still there, following her in the distance like it was painted on the horizon. Asterisk, the next morning, she was found asleep behind the wheel at a gas station 50 miles away. The clerk said she'd stumbled inside, muttering, "Room 7. Don't go to room 7. When investigators went looking for the Lone Star Motel, they found nothing, just open road and dust. But one officer swore his body cam picked up something, a flicker of red light at the edge of the frame. When they slowed it down, they saw a sign. Asterisk, not Lone Star Motel. It said, "Welcome back, Alicia." Asterisk, she vanished a month later. Her truck was found on the same highway, keys in the ignition, engine running, radio static still playing. Story 18. In the early spring of 2001, a small radio station outside Odessa, Texas, went silent for good. Asterisk, its name was KTXL 97.3 FM, known locally as The Lantern, a late-night station famous for ghost stories, trucker calls, and lonely country songs that kept oilfield workers company through the dark. Asterisk, its DJ, Eddie Brandt, worked the graveyard shift for 15 years straight. He lived alone in a trailer behind the station, smoked a pack an hour, and used to joke that his voice was the only one for 50 miles that could still reach the living and the dead. Asterisk, on March 23, 2001, he went on air at 11:59 p.m. for what would be his last broadcast. Asterisk, by sunrise, the station was dead air, and Eddie Brandt was gone. Asterisk, the tape of that night still exists, or parts of it. Most of it is static, but the surviving audio starts normal enough. Asterisk, greater than good evening, West Texas. Eddie says, his voice low and steady. You're tuned in to The Lantern, where we keep the night warm and the shadows talking. Asterisk, then, about 40 minutes in, the sound begins to distort. A faint, wet clicking fills the background. Eddie clears his throat. Asterisk, greater than huh. You all hear that? Got a funny noise on the line tonight. Must be something crawling through the signal. Asterisk, he laughs nervously. But then, someone calls in. Asterisk, the voice on the other end is hard to make out, full of static, muffled, distant. It sounds like a man whispering from underwater. Asterisk, you're not supposed to be broadcasting. Asterisk, Eddie chuckles. Well, I sure am. Been doing it 15 years. Partner? Asterisk, greater than no. The voice says, not after dark. Not anymore. Asterisk, there's a pause. You can hear the creak of Eddie's chair. Then he says, asterisk, what's your name? Friend. Silence. Then, faintly asterisk, greater than you already know me. Asterisk, the tape hisses, and there's this horrible sound like metal grinding bone. Eddie mutters something off mic. Jesus. Mary, before it cuts out. Asterisk, when it comes back. His voice sounds different, lower, slower, asterisk greater, than I'm still here, he says, but the way he says it, it's not right. I'm still here, and I'm not alone. Asterisk, you can hear breathing, not just his, multiple people, gasping softly in rhythm. Then something scrapes across the desk, like nails or teeth against the microphone. Asterisk, Eddie starts describing what he's seeing. His words shake. Asterisk, there's someone outside the glass. No, more than one. Faces, pressed to the window. But they're wrong. They look like they've been in the ground too long. Asterisk, he laughs, then this broken, ragged sound, and says something that makes the hairs on your neck stand up. Asterisk, greater than I think the signal's pulling them in. That was the last clear transmission. Asterisk, the next morning, a maintenance worker found the door to the booth wide open. The on-air light was still glowing, though the power had been cut for hours. The microphone was coated in moisture, and on the inside of the glass, there were handprints. Dozens of them, some small, some with too many fingers. Eddie's chair was still spinning slowly. He was gone. A month later, the FCC sent technicians to dismantle the tower. The static coming from the frequency wouldn't stop, even disconnected from power. It kept humming faintly, like something alive. Asterisk, one of the techs, Lisa Granger, quit that day, she said when she leaned close to one of the transmitters. She heard voices, hundreds of them, whispering, begging, weeping. Asterisk, they were all saying the same thing. She told the sheriff later. Asterisk, they said, we're not dead, we're still on the air. Asterisk, they buried the equipment in a landfill east of Odessa, sealed in concrete. Asterisk, but truckers still tune through the frequencies on long drives, searching for that late-night hum. Asterisk, and sometimes, between 97.2 and 97.4, they catch it, a faint voice, half buried in the static. Asterisk, greater than good evening, West Texas. This is Eddie Brandt, keeping the night warm. Asterisk, some say if you listen long enough, you can hear something behind him, faint music, muffled screams, the sound of fingers tapping on glass. Asterisk, one driver swore that after hearing it, his CB started talking on its own, whispering coordinates that led nowhere but open desert. Asterisk, and at the very end of that transmission, before it cuts to silence, you can hear one last sentence. Asterisk, the signal isn't coming from here anymore. Story, 19 asterisk. It began, as most bad ideas do, with curiosity and a need for thrills. 4 friends from Austin, Eli, Marissa, Cody, and June, had spent years exploring forgotten places for their little YouTube channel, Urban Graveyard. They prided themselves on going where no one else dared. Shut down hospitals, collapsed barns, the husks of long-dead mining towns. But what brought them to Breckenridge County? Out past the dry oil fields and sagging mesquite trees was something darker, a house whispered about on every local forum. A place the townsfolk called the Beckett Place, asterisk. The Beckett family had vanished sometime in the early 1980s. There were no official reports, just rumors that they'd been a small, quiet family. Father, mother, 2 daughters, and a son. One night, the lights in the windows flickered wildly, and by morning, the mail piled up on the porch and the dogs barked without end. The sheriff's office went to check, but no one answered the door. When they finally broke in, the story said, there wasn't a single person inside, but the dinner table was still set, asterisk, and worse. The food was warm, asterisk. That was enough to bring Eli and his crew all the way out there one late October weekend. They arrived just before dusk, their truck kicking up red dust that glittered in the last light. The road narrowed until it wasn't a road anymore, just a path swallowed by weeds, half-teen by the land. When they finally saw the house, June muttered, Jesus Christ, asterisk. The Beckett Place stood 2 stories high, leaning slightly to one side like it was sighing under the weight of decades. Its white paint had peeled into curling yellow ribbons, and the porch was slanted, boards gaping like broken teeth. Every window was black except one on the upper floor, where something white hung like a curtain or a sheet, though, as Marissa pointed out later, there wasn't supposed to be electricity, asterisk. They set up camp near the front, the last streaks of daylight bleeding out over the horizon. The air smelled of dust and rust, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood. Crickets screamed from the grass. Eli started filming their intro, the typical stuff for the audience. Asterisk, welcome back, graveyarders, he said, with that half grin that came alive only when the camera was on. Tonight, we're in Breckenridge County, Texas. Locals say, this house eats people. Let's find out if it's hungry. Asterisk. They laughed nervously, all except June. She wasn't laughing, she was staring at that upstairs window. I saw something move, she whispered. Cody scoffed, probably a bird. Asterisk. But June didn't answer, because whatever she'd seen, it hadn't moved like a bird. It had been slower, more deliberate, asterisk. Inside, the air was cool and damp. Their flashlights cut through decades of dust, painting streaks across the walls. Everything was still in place, the furniture covered in sheets, a piano warped by humidity, a grandfather clock whose pendulum had long since frozen. Asterisk. Marissa ran her fingers along a wall. Feels like they just left. Asterisk. They started filming, exploring room by room. The kitchen was the worst, the table still set for 5. A pot rusted to the stove, something dark and hardened inside the plates, maybe old meat or gravy. Eli zoomed in on a child's toy car lying near a chair. Creepy detail number 1, he whispered into the mic. Asterisk. It was around 11 p.m. when they decided to settle upstairs for the night. They spread sleeping bags on the dusty floor of the hallway. No one wanted to sleep in the actual bedrooms. The air up there was heavier, the smell sharper like mold and faint decay. Asterisk. The house creaked around them, expanding and contracting with the cold. Occasionally, there was another sound, softer, quicker, like footsteps on carpet. Each time, they'd go quiet, flashlights scanning the hall. But there was never anything there. Asterisk. By 2 a.m., they were all half asleep. The last thing Eli remembered before dozing off was Marissa, mumbling something about a door that wasn't there before. Asterisk. When he woke, it was 3:17 a.m., the house was silent. To silent, Cody was gone. Asterisk. At first, Eli thought he might have gone outside, but the front door was still locked. His flashlight beam cut across the hallway and then froze on a shape at the far end. Asterisk. It looked like a person standing in the dark. Back turned. Cody's hoodie. Asterisk. Dude, Eli called softly. No answer. He took a step forward. The beam shook in his hands. Asterisk. Cody, stop screwing around. Asterisk. The figure twitched like something inside. It tried to move but didn't quite know how. Then, slowly, it turned its head toward him. It wasn't Cody. The thing wore his hoodie. Yes, but the skin on its face was wrong. Stretched to tight eyes, sunken deep into bruised sockets. Its mouth opened slowly, and something like a child's giggle bubbled out. Asterisk. Eli stumbled back, tripping over a loose board, shouting for the others. Marissa and June came running, flashlights bouncing, but when they reached the end of the hall, the figure was gone. Only the hoodie lay crumpled on the floor. They didn't find Cody until dawn. He was sitting in the kitchen, at the head of the table, perfectly still. His eyes were open, but there was no color left in them. And in front of him, 3 plates, freshly set, food steaming faintly, though the stove hadn't been touched in decades. Marissa screamed. Eli didn't move. His camera was still running, red light blinking. Asterisk. June whispered, We have to go. Now. Asterisk, they tried. They really did. But the front door wouldn't open. Neither would the windows. Every room led to another, looping back into the same hallway. The sun outside never rose. The clocks on the walls all pointed to 3:17. Asterisk, by the second day, the air began to taste like iron. Marissa was the next to go. She followed a child's laughter into the parlor and never came back. They found her camera later, face down on the piano keys. When Eli played it back, the footage showed her walking through a door that shouldn't exist, and when she crossed the threshold, the door vanished behind her. Asterisk, by the third day, June wasn't speaking anymore. She just sat by the window, staring at that same patch of darkness outside. Asterisk, Eli's last footage was a close-up, his voice trembling. Asterisk, this house doesn't want us to leave, he said. It wants to finish dinner. Asterisk, the recording ended with a faint scraping sound, like chairs being pulled back from a table. Asterisk, weeks later, a hiker found their truck abandoned on the dirt road. Cameras, tents, even phones inside, but no people. Asterisk, the footage went viral. Of course, some said it was fake. Others swore they could see shapes moving in the background. Reflections in the window glass, pale faces, watching, but what no one ever explained was the fifth plate on that table. When the sheriff went back to check the house, there were still 5 places set for dinner. The food was warm. Asterisk, and when the sheriff finally turned to leave, the upstairs window flickered just once, like a TV tuning in. Asterisk, a pale hand reached up, pressed flat against the glass, and the voice of a man whispered from the dark inside. Welcome back to Dark Whisper. Story 20 Asterisk, it was one of those endless Texas nights, the kind where the sky feels too wide, the air too still. A long stretch of cracked highway between Livingston and Shepherd, where the stars looked like bullet holes punched through the heavens. Asterisk, Derek Malone had been driving 12 hours straight, headlights eating the road, radio whispering static. He was heading home from a failed job interview in Houston, tired, broke, and half drunk on cheap coffee. Around midnight, the fuel light blinked red. He cursed, checked the GPS, but his signal had died 20 miles back. That's when he saw the sign, a rusted metal board, half buried in weeds, the letters barely visible under the grime. Gas Food Lodging 3 miles gives it wasn't on any map he'd ever seen. But when he turned off the highway, the road stretched out like it had been waiting for him. Asterisk, he drove another few minutes before the trees gave way to an old house, big, square, and wrong. Even in the dark, he could tell it wasn't just old. It was empty in the wrong way. A 2-story place with white siding gone gray, and a vacancy sign swinging from one chain. A faint glow pulsed in one upstairs window. Asterisk, he figured it was a bed and breakfast, or some old roadside motel. Asterisk, when he knocked, the door creaked open on its own. Asterisk, inside, the air was cold and damp. He called out, nothing, just that strange sound of the house breathing around him. Then he saw the desk, a little wooden counter with a dusty guest book and a small brass key resting on it. Room 3. Asterisk, he looked around. The air smelled faintly sweet, old perfume and mold. When he picked up the key, something cold brushed his wrist, like fingertips. He jerked back, but no one was there. The stairs moaned under his weight. Room 3 was at the end of the hall. He unlocked it and stepped inside. The room looked freshly made, white sheets tucked tight, a lamp burning softly. There was even a glass of water on the bedside table, beads of condensation running down its side. Asterisk, it should have comforted him, but it didn't. It felt too ready. Asterisk, he was asleep in minutes, or he thought he was, because sometime in the night, he woke to a noise that didn't belong to this century. It was the faint hum of a phonograph. Downstairs, muffled music drifted through the floor, something from the 1930s, scratchy and slow. Derek sat up, heart thudding. The water on the nightstand rippled gently, as if something had just walked past. Asterisk, he swung his legs over the bed, stood, and opened the door. The hallway was full of light now, a golden flickering glow. Voices murmured below, laughter, clinking glasses, the shuffle of shoes. He leaned over the railing. The lobby was full of people dressed in old clothes, dancing slowly to the music. Men in suspenders, women in long gowns, faces pale under the dim bulbs. Asterisk, he blinked, and every head turned toward him at once. Every single face. Their smiles froze, stretching too wide, and the music warped into a low, grinding sound. The record seemed to slow down, the voices bending in impossible tones. Derek stumbled back, slamming the door and locking it, his breath ragged. Something moved behind him. He turned. Asterisk, a woman was sitting on the bed, her skin pale as the moonlight, her black hair falling over one shoulder. She was wearing a white dress, old-fashioned, yellowed with time. Asterisk, you came back, she whispered. He couldn't speak. She smiled, tilting her head. You always come back. Asterisk, he reached for the door handle, but it burned his hand, scalding hot. The lamp flickered, and the air turned thick and wet, like breathing underwater. Asterisk, then she began to hum, the same tune from downstairs. Asterisk, when he blinked again, she was gone. Asterisk, only her reflection stayed in the mirror beside the bed. and in that reflection, the woman's hand reached out from the glass. Asterisk it pressed against the inside of the mirror, leaving behind a wet handprint that slowly began to drip, not water, but something darker. Asterisk by dawn, the house was gone. Asterisk the highway patrol found Derek's car abandoned by Route 59. Engine still running, headlights on. His wallet and phone were inside. The driver's seat was empty. The door open. A trail of wet footprints leading toward a patch of grass where no house stood. Asterisk. But here's the part that chills even seasoned cops. A week later, a trucker pulled over to rest near the same mile marker. He swore he saw a faint glow through the trees. An old house, a vacancy sign swinging, and in the upstairs window, a man was standing, staring out. His clothes were modern, his face pale, and when the trucker looked closer, the man mouthed two words, "Help me." Asterisk that house on Route 59 doesn't show up on maps. It never did. But people still see the signs sometimes, rusted, bent, pointing toward nothing. Asterisk, and if you follow it, well, maybe the woman in white's still waiting for you to come back.